to the 80-20 Baseball Podcast. Strike! The 80-20 Coaching Masterclass, our weekly get-together where coaches go from new to good and good to great. Mastering the fundamentals and the art of coaching.
Welcome, coaches, parents, and even those players that are listening. Welcome to this week's get-together here. I am pumped up about 4 different things. One, as you heard, coming in, the new intro, outro. I thought it'd be good to mix it up and throw in a new intro, outro, new message. So I had my guy Keith put together something. I picked out the instrumentals that would fit the vibe of the podcast, and I thought they just had a nice beat to them. So a new intro, and there's a new outro, as you'll hear when we end this episode. The other thing, I think this new microphone I mentioned last week is working out really well. Definitely was more than I was looking to spend, but at the end of the day, this is a podcast and I want it to come through clearly and be easy on the ears. I don't have a voice that's going to earn me a voiceover job, and I definitely don't have a voice that's going to have RCA knocking at my door to put together an EP, but I am pumped up. New mic. Speaking of EP, we got Coach DP, Coach David Pyrus, my brother-in-law, back on the podcast. He was on a few years back, and I thought just did an amazing job of sharing a message with all of you listeners that's relatable and usable, applicable. So Coach Pyrus is back on. He's been coaching for quite a while now, coming off a all-star state championship run out there in Colorado this past season. So we have part 1 of that interview coming up in just a minute. Here are the 4 questions, the 4 topics that Coach Pyrus is going to address and share with us his strategies that he uses relative to these topics and questions. Number 1, I asked him about the combination of his team's success when it comes to winning on the scoreboard and winning, like last year, a state championship, but even more importantly, having a good time, having fun out there on the baseball field each and every week. So he's going to talk about that combination and how he balances the two to be successful in both areas. He's going to share his thoughts on what he believes are the main reasons his teams have been successful. Then I asked him to discuss the main things that he believes have brought about the majority or the bulk of his team's success. What are the main things they emphasize, that they train, that they do in practice? What are the main messages that he shares with his teams that he believes have had the most impact on his team's success? And the last thing we'll talk about in part 1, he shares out something that he thought would work when he started coaching, but found out didn't really work all that well. And this happens to all of us. It happens to every coach. And I think that's a sign of a great coach, that we're iterating and improving with that growth mindset. And now the 4th thing that has me pumped up was this great review left a few weeks ago. Here's the podcast review. It says, I've been a listener for the last 2 years and went back and caught up on the episodes before starting to listen to the current ones. I have coached my boys in several sports throughout the years, and Coach Bo gets it. He understands the importance of kids having fun in sports. A great way for them to have fun is to be competitive. I make my practices centered around competition and the kids moving from drill to drill. I also make my practices harder than games and limit the amount of coaching in games so they can focus and have fun. My kids have a love for sports, and I believe this podcast has helped influence that. There's also a lot of leadership lessons that I use when leading my crew, in this case in the fire department, and this podcast is full of useful information for any parent or coach. Thank you, Coach Bo. So I know this is a listener that I've emailed and we've talked, and just pumps me up. Either way, even if you haven't emailed me, these pump me up. That's really what it's all about. I haven't made $1 on this podcast. We're in our 6th year. We're not that far from episode 300. I record and edit and publish these podcast episodes. I'm pretty self-driven, but reading a message or review like that, talk about an extra wind in the sail to keep this podcast rocking and rolling. I also talked to a local coach I've been working with in my coaching director role, and he said they've been using the 80-20 baseball hitting plan, hitting approach. There's an article on the website, and there's numerous episodes we've talked about it, but definitely go to the website and read that article. So one of the local coaches I've been working with, great group of guys, said it's a game changer. The hitting approach that they're using, they're having a ton of success already. And it's something that takes time to really implement because it's such a split-second decision. Pitch selection, swinging at the right pitches, less than a second, less than half a second of decision-making time. So that's something that takes time to rep. To build that habit doesn't just happen right away. Like get your hands up to start your swing. That can be fixed pretty quick. But when it comes to such a quick moving part, such as timing up a swing, swinging at the right pitches, that takes a lot of reps and a lot of coaching coaching up. So they're already having a lot of success with that. So that was awesome to get that message. Now, before we dive into part one of the interview with Coach Pyrus, I said I'd share a communication tip that I believe will increase our players' knowledge of the game, increase the speed in which our players use and implement what we're teaching them, which saves us a bunch of time and gets the players better faster, and also saves us time from having to repeat ourselves. And that is this. And this goes for anytime you're talking to kids, teenagers, or even newbies at your job. I highly recommend talking at their level with a sprinkling of more sophisticated / advanced vocabulary. As coaches and in a lot of areas of life, I think we get into this kind of battle between trying to communicate our point, but also come across as knowing what we're talking about. So we try to talk a little more advanced, right? It's kind of natural to use bigger words. Say you're a new coach and you're out there and you have other coaches around. You might use bigger words. You might use some of the new slang, the new acronyms that are in the baseball coaching community. And I think this is a big mistake if we do it most of the time. I highly recommend that our messages that we communicate with our players are at their level in terms of vocabulary and just overall complexity. We need to talk at their level with a sprinkling of more sophisticated, next level, advanced vocabulary and messaging. Here's something that works really well. And I think this works really well with all kids. I know there aren't a lot of blanket strategies that are successful across the board, but I think this is one of those. And that is every once in a while, you throw in a more sophisticated message or term or word, and then you say, in other words, this means a simple example of that would be saying something like, hitters, we really want our launch angle to be between 10 and 20 degrees. In other words, we want to hit line drives that go over the infielders' heads. Another simple example of this is saying, hey, players, I don't want to see any basket catches out there unless it's necessary. I want to see you get under the ball, catch it up above, catch it up at your chest or higher whenever possible. I don't want to see any basket catches. In other words, I don't want to see you catching it down here. Now, a lot of the players know what a basket catch is, but there will be kids, especially at the lower levels, that don't. So now those are just two basic examples, but anytime you share a message and you're not certain that 100% of your players know it or should know it, then I think it's important to step back and say something to the effect of, in other words, what I mean by that is X, Y, and Z. Or, hey, we're going to do drag bunts today. We got drag bunts. We're going to work on drag bunts. Now, a drag bunt, we're bunting for a hit. We're showing it late. We're showing the bunt late. We're trying to disguise it and look like we're hitting. We're going to show late, meaning when the pitcher lets go of the ball or is about to let go of the ball, then we start to make the bunt movement. So you start using words like, in other words, or what I mean by that, or meaning X, Y, and Z. I think this is a good way to not only use more sophisticated, advanced vocabulary and messaging from time to time without going over the players' heads. The best way to implement this is get in the habit of when you say a word that you're like, most of my players or some of my players, even if it's just one or two, or there's a high likelihood that at least some of my players don't understand that term or that acronym or whatever, then just default to saying, in other words, X, Y, and Z. What do I mean by that is X, Y, and Z. Or another way of saying that is X, Y, and Z. I would avoid saying, hey, for those of you that don't know what it means, this is what it means. Or for those of you that are new and don't know what's going on, this is what I mean. I would avoid that message. I would say, in other words, or what I mean by that is this, or another way of saying that is X, Y, and Z, or you physically show it to them. So you can still use more advanced words, but it's always followed up with synonyms or similar messaging at their level, at their grade level, or maybe even a little below. Be careful oversimplifying it because it come across as kind of condescending. All right, let's dive in to part one of our interview with Coach David Pyrus, who's coaching out there, the 11, 12-year-old level, been doing it quite a while out there in Colorado. All right, I am here with Coach Pyrus, David Pyrus. How you doing, David?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm great. Yeah, I'm with you. Baseball season opening day was yesterday as we record this. So yeah, I'm excited. Thanks for taking the time to come on here. I know you are super busy, and I think that's just one of the reasons you're a perfect fit for this podcast and for the listeners. You're in the trenches doing what all of our listeners are doing in a sense. Coach Pyrus was on episode 195 and 196. So if you haven't listened to that after this, definitely recommend going back and listening to that. So, Coach Pyrus, David's day job is not baseball. It's not coaching baseball. In fact, he's actually a highly regarded criminologist. He's written multiple books. He travels around giving speeches on that topic. I even noticed you went on some podcasts just within the last couple months to talk about what you do for your day job. And so you're really well known in that area, but you're a dad, like most of us, that just wants to be a really good youth baseball coach. And you've been in the trenches for, I want to say, at least 6 seasons, if not 7. And you've had a lot of success as a coach, not just winning, which you've had your fair share of winning, but sounds like you're really creating an environment where the kids are having a lot of fun too, more importantly. And I think because of that, you're exactly the kind of person that I love having on the podcast to share your insights. You're busy. I know you talked before we got on. You got 2 or 3 other big things on your plate on top of the youth coaching. So many of the podcasts out there, there's a lot of good baseball podcasts, but I found that they bring on a lot of college coaches and pro coaches, which are very knowledgeable about baseball and even varsity baseball coaches for high school level. But that's really their day job, definitely for college and pro. That's their day job. That's all they do all day long. And that's it. That's not our situation. And even the varsity coaches typically involved after about noon, after lunchtime, they're pretty much all baseball for the next 6 hours every day. So you're a parent, you're coaching a youth team, you got a whole bunch on your plate. So I'm happy to have you here. And I know your time is tight. With that, let's dive into the first kind of question topic. Just if you could share a little synopsis of your backstory with the listeners.
Yeah, I mean, I would think of my route into coaching as a pretty traditional route. I did it because my kid loved baseball and it's fun to be out there. Whatever stresses of the workday that you experience, the second you get on that field, all of that stuff starts to go away. You're with kids, you're having fun, the feeling of the crunch of the dirt in your feet or the grass in the outfield, and we're in Boulder, Colorado. We've got our mountains in the background. It's just a really beautiful setting and it changes everything because, the day job, thankfully I've got some flexibility that allows me to get off a little bit early and to get out to the field with the kids. My route into this was I played as a kid from T-ball all the way up to about age 16. I was better at tennis than I was at baseball. So I played varsity tennis the whole time and you couldn't do both sports. But thankfully, my son really enjoyed baseball and I started getting involved from T-ball and then started managing a team in a little league team into single A, double A, triple A, and what we call our majors group. And then got involved in some travel teams as well. There's passionate people who love the game of baseball and youth sports and want to do what's right for the kids. So it's almost the more difficult question is to say no than it is to say yes. It's fun to be out there. And it's fun to be able to take ideas from a podcast like this and then to put them into practice to try to maximize the baseball experience for kids.
Probably the same reason or a very similar reason to most of the listeners. Their kids love or kid loves baseball and love sports, and you want to get out there. And like you said, it's hard to say no. And looking back, I thought of this recently. And when you start looking at people as they get older, you have family members get older and they're coming to the end of the tracks, and you start thinking, how do I want to look back on life? And I go, well, being a youth coach is something you can look back and really hang your hat on. It's something to be proud of. Being a youth sports coach is something you could really say, that was something I'm so happy that I did, and there will be zero regrets. With that said, I've seen your coaching journey and it's been awesome to hear, and you've shared a lot about it. Why don't you share with the listeners, maybe describe your growth as a coach from your first season to now and the areas you feel that you've improved in?
Sure. Yeah. I was going through photos on Apple and one of the parents shared with me a picture of a group of our kids together playing T-ball. And, it was a team photo. They got the arms around each other. And like this little league season, I've got, I think 4 of those kids from my T-ball team on my team this year, well, including my son. When you think about all, when they're 4 or 5 years old, all the way now to they're 11 and 12 years old, how much progress that you've seen over time. And so, I know you talk about this a lot, but, one of my key metrics is, do they want to come back and play on my baseball team again? And if the answer to that is yes, to me, that's more an indicator of success than are they throwing the ball better or catching the ball better or winning games. And so seeing a lot of continuity from season to season in kids playing on a team that I'm coaching, kids coming back and playing the game of baseball, Those are the things that are among the most important to me. But, in the last couple of years, though, the competition starts ramping up as they make that transition to get to about 10, 11, and 12, at least in the Little League world. There is a lot more competition, especially as you move into all stars. So I did coach our 10-year-old division all-star team, and we did well, winning our district championship and then losing in the state championship. And then last year I coached the 11-year-old team and we won the state championship. I think I was most proud of seeing them come from behind for 4 of those victories to go undefeated, to win games. It just shows that there's a lot of heart in the team and they could really build momentum and pitch in clutch situations. Endless rigorous training that comes from ensuring that this is a fun environment. This is an environment that kids know that they could take risks, and sometimes they'll fail and other times they'll succeed. It comes from trusting your teammates and trusting your coaches. Like, there's a reason why we're putting you in that position at this point in time. And it just comes from making sure that these kids have a lot of fun and it's an enjoyable time that they spend together. All those other things start to lock into place when you ensure that you have a good team culture and that when you train hard and you practice hard and make sure that it's an enjoyable experience on the field, which translates into a lot of life lessons off the field too.
100%. So you've had success in both areas where your team's won, but more importantly, you're having kids come back and wanting to play. And I have changed a little bit or kind of opened my eyes to, I think when the kids have success or some taste of success, they are more likely to want to come back, right? There's a couple of main reasons I found that kids don't keep playing baseball. One, they get hit by a pitch and that's it. That happens
Indeed.
more than you might think, right? Or at least I didn't notice that because I never thought, I always hated getting hit by pitches, but I didn't think of quitting baseball, but I get it. It's a big deal. And then the other one is they didn't have any success. Like, they suck and they just like, I'm going to go do something I'm good at. Right. It's hard. And humans are not wired to keep doing things that we don't ever have success at. Right. And then the third thing is that maybe another better alternative, another sport or something, like you did tennis. So of course that's something a little more out of our control, but you have a great attitude with the kids and a great mindset, and you allow them, something you said there, allow them to take risks. I hear that it's like play loose and it's fun. When kids play loose and not tense, they're going to play better and they're going to have more fun. They're going to be more excited to come out to the field. So you've hit both of those key metrics or KPIs, you could say, in the business world. The kids keep wanting to come back. They have fun playing for you, but you also help get them better. It's not just like, hey, let's have a birthday party kind of environment. You want to help these kids be successful on the field with their skills. So the listeners, when you hear that, Coach Pyruz is really into learning about the skills and running good drills and high quality practices too. So it goes together, and I think they all kind of work together. I think you talked about your team's success and making the environment enjoyable for your team. What are some of those core things that you believe have brought about the bulk of your team's success? Thinking of the 80-20 principle. What are those things that you feel like have had a bigger influence on your team's success over the past couple years? In terms of the things you train and practice and the messages you share with the team.
Yeah, first thing is team culture. I mean, it has to be everybody buying into the team. And it doesn't matter if this is Little League or it's a travel team. It's just to make sure that you have the right culture in place. And that starts from day one in setting expectations. What are our 5 core standards to which you're going to be held as a team? And then to hold kids accountable when they do fall short of those standards. And it's not just one and done. You got to reiterate that over the course of the season. So practice number 2, 3, 4, game 3, 4, 5, you're asking, what are our standards? And getting them to remind them of it. And that also means showing up to practice and working hard at practice. And, to put them in a position to where we have like compassionate competition, not to where you're just competing at all ends, but to say, look, we're trying to get better as a group. You're going to do your best to build up your teammates because they're going to be, fighting, so to speak, alongside you when it comes time for the actual competition. So it's not just doing extra practices or making sure that their lives are entirely consumed by baseball. Some of the kids would be fine with it, but not all of them would be. And it's not just doing strength and conditioning, but it's also saying, let's go beyond just doing a bullpen. Let's do live intra-team scrimmages and make it as competitive as possible. recognize that we're going to pause, we're going to learn and do live at bats against your own pitchers. It makes it more of a game like atmosphere because Little League, you don't get that many games. If you're lucky, it's 15, 16 games in a season, but you could double that easily by making inter-team scrimmages in practices. And, once you start getting comfortable around the aces on your own team, it's going to make it a lot easier to play kids on other teams. And so it's not to say that we don't do specialized drills or we don't, work on shielding. We absolutely do, but that's built into a larger sort of structure that really emphasizes good team competition as well as reinforcing the broader team culture.
What are some of the standards that have worked well with your team that you talk about at the beginning of the year and consistently uphold?
Sure. Number one thing, it's going to be respect. I mean, we want to make sure that we have kids who are not being rude to umpires. I mean, being an umpire is already a hard enough job. You got parents barking at them. You got kids rolling their eyes or drawing the lines outside the plate where the ball missed. And, a lot of them either volunteer their time or they don't get paid a lot. They're making youth sports happen. So making sure, number one, that you're respectful to the umpires, number two, to the other team, and then to your teammates. Your teammate makes a mistake, you don't yell at them. You say you're going to do it better next time. Or if they notice that, something that they did wrong fundamentally, it's either have the coach talk to them or give them more positive messaging. The second one is hustling. They've always got to hustle out there. So showing that it's maximum effort, go out and get dirty, prize being dirty, diving for baseballs, knowing that it could hurt. And, that's a little bit easier when they get older. So always hustling, showing maximum effort on the field. The goal is to do damage at the plate. Punctuality, you got to show up on time, and usually it's beyond their control, but you've got to be there with your equipment, and then controlling like the outbursts or the anger and recognizing that you're working with kids who are just not, the brain development simply hasn't fully occurred for them. And so recognizing that there is a way to behave on the field. And if you are frustrated, we can take a timeout, take a spot on the bench, or get a family member to console you if you can. But these are kids and there are going to be outbursts. But to recognize that you're not going to smash your equipment on the ground or throw your helmet. There's certain ways that we expect you to behave on the field. And again, these are life lessons. There's certain ways that you should be expected to behave at school or at your work or with your family at home. And so the things that you learn in this structured environment should translate into multiple other areas of our core socializing institutions.
Absolutely. Yeah, impulse control is something I think we can help kids learn from a younger age so they have fewer outbursts. I love your two standards, those two main. I know you have a few more respect and hustle. And you think about an adult, be a good person and have a motor, right? Like
Uh-huh.
any good adult that's a good person and has a motor is going in a great direction. So, what we use sports as more than anything is a fun, cool training ground for life. The umpire respect, I was thinking about that as you were sharing that. I've always kind of used the standard, you get a warning, the first time you say something to an umpire, this is the kids, the players. You get a warning, the second time you're out of the game. The other one, I think we got to find a way, and I think the leagues, and I had a guest on talking about trying to get the leagues to get the parents. I think the leagues need to do better, and this is a little tangent. I don't want to get too far off of, but we got to get the leagues to set a strict league policy. Don't put it on the coach to remove a parent that's yelling at the official. That should be done league wide, so there's not that conflict of interest. But yeah, respect the umpire.
I don't see it as much in our little league, because most of those umpires are kids who played little league a couple of years before that. I see it more with travel baseball where people feel comfortable just barking at umpires. Such a bad look from parents. Yeah, it's tough to see because these people are just making youth sports happen. If it weren't for those umpires, we wouldn't be playing.
Yeah, it is a bad look. Those kids are out there basically earning a couple bags of sunflower seeds a game.
Yeah.
And I'm actually having an umpire come on in a couple months. A kid I used to coach years ago,
Huh.
and he does high school, he does youth, high school, and even college umpiring now. So I'm going to bring him on and we're going to talk about that from the umpire's perspective. So I love your key standards, be respectful and hustle. And I like the umbrella approach where that covers, it's like an insurance policy. The umbrella policies are nice because it covers a lot more things. So a little more flexibility when you got to call State Farm or
Yeah.
Allstate and get things covered. So I think having that umbrella policy, but then the challenge of also clarity because it can't be vague, but respect and hustle. What does that look like? So that's a challenge I think coaches could keep in mind, have that umbrella policy that you could add to, but also the clarity where the kids know exactly what's expected out of them. They're not blindsided by some different rule or new rule that they think you just just made up, but you had it already in mind all season long. So when you were a new coach, you're starting off, this was a while ago. You've been doing this a while. Was there something that you thought was going to work when you started, but found out didn't really work as well as you thought it was going to?
Yeah, I mean, overplanned for a game and who's going to be in what position over the course of these 6 innings. And it just rarely would it work as planned. There are just certain times where it may be a kid had a bad day at school, or there's some trouble in the household, or a friend treated them really poorly that day, or, maybe there was a mild injury from playing football or going skiing or something like that. And you're just not aware. And so you're planning in advance, trying to make sure there's good, even spread of field time. Kids in the infield, outfield, not too much on the bench. And, maybe your pitcher that you think is going to come in and throw really well is done after a third of an inning. So that's the harder part. I'll still plan and try to have a general structure in place for positions, but I don't post it like I used to. I used to post it so every kid would know what position they're going to be in. Now what I say is, here's a maximum bench time. Maybe it's 1 or 2 innings total on the bench, and everybody's guaranteed to get at least 1 infield inning on defense. But I'll just post up like the magnetic board and then move positions around, as opposed to make it very clear, because then it sets kids up for being, a little bit frustrated if they think they might pitch and then they don't, or they might get their favorite position and they don't. It's just more about like the rhythms of the game. So I think that's one of the harder parts, was the over planning, because you like to have structure in place, but baseball just doesn't lend itself very well to a good, clear structure, because that's not the nature of the game. So I'd say that's one I've really had to change over the years.
That's a great lesson I mean, that's how life is, right? Having contingency plans. And so the message I get from that is coaches have a contingency plan, at least something in mind, maybe not written out, but just a contingency plan for certain situations that are likely to come up. But one I always say is you should have a rainy day contingency plan for practice. You should have 2 or 3 options, whether that's a batting cage, a local batting cage, facility, maybe a pizza party, maybe a trampoline park, maybe an escape room, maybe a video session at the house. Maybe you go down and in the basement and you got the big screen on and the kids come over and they watch a video of them from the last game. So I think having contingency plans is important. I know we're youth coaches, so we don't have all day. We're not Navy SEALs who can have 5 contingency plans for everything that goes wrong, but having some basic contingency plans. And I love how I hope everybody picked up on what Coach Pyrouz shared there about giving the kids, not surprising them, like giving them some information about what's coming up. Like, these are the broad expectations or what you can expect from the game. But David also gave himself wiggle room. And that's a great thing, because now you're not letting kids down and they don't go in completely blind, but you don't overpromise. I really like how you do that.
I mean, I want to give kids, especially for a recreational league, a chance to play their favorite position. If I know that you really like second base or first base, I want to make sure that they know that over the course of the season, they will get to play that, as long as it's not a safety risk. Like, I'm not going to put a kid who can't catch very well at first base, because I don't want that ball ending up in their eye or in their teeth, but it means a lot to them. And so every kid, if they want a chance to pitch, they're going to get a chance to pitch, unless they really don't want to do it. So just letting them know from the outset that that's what's going to happen. And you're all going to spend some time in outfield, and you're all going to spend some time in infield. Winning your little league championship it's fun. It's good to have good competition. But in the end, if you go 16-0, or if you go 0-16, the teams weren't drawn right, or the competition wasn't right. Like, if you're in travel ball and you're dominating your division, you should be moving up a division. The goal, I think, is probably about 500, equal numbers of wins and losses. I like that approach. Kids will get disappointed. Kids get lied to all the time. Teachers say they're going to do things and they don't. Parents claim they're going to do things. They get too busy and they lose it. So I don't want to be another one of those people who's making certain claims that they just can't follow through with.
I think that's great parenting advice too. It's just part of life. And I think that's part of what you do so well is you reframe those expectations of what success is and what reality. You align the expectations with what's most likely going to happen. So kids aren't surprised. They're good with it. All right. That wraps up our interview with Coach David Pyrouz. Just a great message. And I think the entire message, the entire interview is stuff that's usable by, if not every coach, the majority of coaches. We don't need to extrapolate. We don't need to unpack it. It's simply simply straightforward to what we're going through and usable with our teams and our players and our kids. So part 2 next week. Also next week, top 5 coaching posts of the month. Excited about this one. And in 2 weeks, we're going to talk about a college basketball coach that I brought up a year or so ago. He's doing some stuff, and I'm going to talk about how we need to avoid this as a coach. And while this coach does a lot of great things, and he's a well-known college basketball coach, national championship college basketball coach, there's some huge red flags as of recent. I want to share how we can learn from that. And then you can go see what I'm talking about on YouTube, or maybe you've already seen it. Maybe you watch the games and you can see what I'm talking about. And this is something we want to avoid. We'll talk about that in 2 weeks. And also in 2 weeks, I'll share a strategy that'll help us not lose our cool so quickly with players, will help us stay calmer with players, especially when they make mistakes or act up. This is more of a behavioral issue thing. When you have players that are causing problems with their behavior, and this happens on every team, sometimes a lot, there's a paradigm that we can use that will change our response to more successfully address behavior issues and challenges and problems. So if you wouldn't mind leaving a review or share this podcast with a friend, that's the 2 best things you can do and would be really appreciated. And until next week, let's take care of ourselves, our health, so we can be there for our families, be there for our close friends when they need us, and be the best coach we can be when we're out there on the field. All right, y'all, take care. Until next week, adios.
This has been the 80-20 Baseball Podcast, the 80-20 Baseball Masterclass. We got this. Now, let's take the field.